Sign this. Ethan handed Ava divorce papers at her mother's graveside. The casket was still being lowered into the ground. The priest was still praying. She was 8 months pregnant with his child. Sign it now. His voice was cold, commanding, like he was closing a business deal instead of ending a marriage. His mistress, Brielle, stood behind him wearing designer sunglasses and fake sympathy. His parents watched from beneath a black umbrella, satisfaction carved into their faces like stone. Ava's hand shook as she signed. Right there, at her mother's grave, at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Los Angeles, with California smog hanging heavy in the air and mourners whispering around her. She lost everything in that moment. Her mother, her marriage, her dignity. But Ethan Blake made one fatal mistake. He had no idea who her mother really was. He had no idea what Camille Morgan had left behind, and he had absolutely no idea what was coming for him. Before we dive in, we need to go back to how it all started. But first, make sure you subscribe to this channel and watch till the very end, because what happens next, you wouldn't want to miss it. Now let's dive into the story. The cemetery was silent, except for the sound of dirt hitting mahogany. Ava Morgan stood at the edge of her mother's grave, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, trying to breathe through pain that had nothing to do with pregnancy. The Los Angeles sky hung gray and oppressive, matching the crushing weight pressing down on her chest. Camille Morgan was gone. The woman who raised her alone, protected her fiercely, loved her without conditions, was now 6 feet under. And Ava had never felt more alone in her entire life. Her husband, Ethan, stood beside her, but he might as well have been a stranger. His hand was limp in hers, his body rigid, his eyes fixed on something beyond the casket being lowered into the earth. She squeezed his fingers, desperate for comfort, for connection, for anything that reminded her she wasn't completely abandoned. He pulled away. The pastor's voice droned on about ashes and dust, about God's mercy and eternal peace, but Ava heard none of it. She was watching Ethan's hand slide into his jacket pocket, watching his jaw clench, watching him pull out a crisp envelope that looked too official, too deliberate for a funeral. He turned to her, his face blank, his eyes empty of the warmth she once knew. Ava. His voice cut through the pastor's prayer like a knife. She looked at him, confused, still clinging to hope that whatever was happening wasn't what her gut was screaming at her. He handed her the envelope. "What is this?" she whispered. "Divorce papers. I already signed them." The words hit her like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her hand gripping the envelope as if it might explode. "What?" Her voice cracked. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" He looked away, toward the line of black cars parked along the cemetery path, toward the life he'd already chosen without her. "It's over. This marriage. Us. It's better this way." Better this way. Her mother was being buried. She was carrying his child. And he thought now was the time to hand her divorce papers. "Are you serious right now?" Her voice rose, panic mixing with rage. "My mother just died. I'm pregnant with your baby." "You're doing this here?" Ethan's face twitched, a flicker of something that might have been guilt, or might have been annoyance. "I know the timing isn't ideal, but waiting would only make it harder. You're strong, Ava. You'll figure it out." Strong. He was calling her strong while destroying her. She wanted to scream, to slap him, to demand answers about who he'd become. But the words stuck in her throat, strangled by shock and grief. Around them, mourners began to notice. Heads turned, whispers started. The sacred moment of grief transformed into a spectacle of humiliation. Ava felt their eyes on her, felt the weight of their judgment, their pity, their morbid curiosity about what she'd done to deserve this public execution. That's when she saw them. Ethan's parents, Richard and Victoria Blake, standing 30 feet away beneath their unnecessary umbrella. They weren't crying. They weren't mourning with her. They were watching, waiting. Victoria's mouth curved into something that looked dangerously close to satisfaction. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned, orchestrated, timed for maximum devastation. They had waited for her weakest moment and used her mother's funeral as the backdrop for her destruction. Why? Ava's voice came out hollow. You were never right for this family, Ethan said, his tone matter-of-fact, rehearsed. We tried to make it work, but you don't fit our world. Brielle understands what I need. Brielle. The name hung in the air like poison. Ava's eyes found the woman standing behind Ethan, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes that held no remorse, only triumph. How long? Ava asked. Does it matter? How long? Ethan sighed, impatient now. 18 months. 18 months. Half her pregnancy. Most of her mother's illness. All those late nights he claimed were work emergencies, all lies. The pastor had stopped praying. Even he was watching now, uncertain whether to intervene or retreat. Sign the papers, Ava, Ethan said, his voice hardening. If you don't do this now, I'll drag you through court and take everything. Your mother's house, whatever savings she left, everything. My lawyers will make sure you walk away with nothing. Nothing. She had nothing anyway. Or so he believed. Ava looked down at the envelope, at her mother's casket, at the baby moving inside her. She signed. Her hand shook so violently she could barely read the signature. But she signed every page, every clause, every document that erased 3 years of marriage in black ink. Ethan took the papers without a word. He walked away before the dirt even covered the casket. Brielle followed, her heels clicking on the cemetery path like victory drums. The Blakes left next, satisfied smiles intact. Ava stood alone at her mother's grave, 8 months pregnant, divorced, and humiliated in front of everyone who'd ever known her. But Ethan Blake had made a catastrophic mistake. He had no idea the woman he just left, pregnant, grieving, publicly destroyed, was about to inherit everything. The week after the funeral passed in a fog of grief and exhaustion. Ava moved through her downtown LA apartment like a ghost, unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to process the double loss that had carved her life into before and after. Ethan came by once to collect his things. He didn't apologize, didn't explain, didn't even look at her belly. He just packed his designer suits, his tech gadgets, his expensive cologne, and left without closing the door behind him. Brielle waited in the car outside, engine running. The friends Ava thought she had evaporated overnight. Group chats went silent. Calls weren't returned. Invitations stopped coming. Apparently, taking sides meant choosing Ethan, the successful tech entrepreneur, over Ava, the unemployed, pregnant woman whose own husband didn't want her. Even her cousin Jessica, who'd cried at the funeral, stopped responding to texts. Ava was alone, completely, terrifyingly alone. She spent her days sorting through her mother's belongings in the small house in Glendale where she'd grown up. Camille had lived simply, almost frugally. Modest furniture, second-hand dishes, clothes from outlet malls. Nothing suggested wealth. Nothing hinted at the empire Ava was about to discover. On the 8th day after the funeral, while packing up her mother's bedroom, Ava found it. The jewelry box. It was small, wooden, carved with intricate patterns Ava remembered tracing with her fingers as a child. Inside were a few simple pieces: her grandmother's wedding band, a silver locket, pearl earrings, and beneath the velvet lining an envelope, sealed with gold wax, stamped with a C. Ava's hands trembled as she broke the seal. "My dearest Ava, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you are in danger, even if you don't know it yet. Everything I built is now yours, but you must move carefully. The Blakes cannot know. I planned for this. I planned for everything. Go to Morgan Trust Bank on Wilshire Boulevard. Ask for box 912. The key is enclosed. Protect yourself, protect your baby, and remember, revenge is unnecessary when truth is undeniable. Love, Mom." A small brass key fell into Ava's palm. She read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each pass. Everything I built? Camille had worked as an accountant for a small firm in Pasadena. She drove a 12-year-old Honda. She clipped coupons. What could she have possibly built? Ava's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Heard you signed without a lawyer. Smart. Saved me a lot of money. Ethan." Mocking her even now. Ava stared at the key in her hand, at her mother's careful handwriting, at the words that seemed impossible but felt true in a way she couldn't explain. The Blakes cannot know. Her mother had seen through them. Had predicted this. Ava didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed with her mother's letter pressed against her chest, feeling her baby kick, feeling something shift inside her that wasn't just pregnancy. It was purpose. At dawn she dressed carefully. Not in grief clothes, but in the one good outfit she owned, a navy dress that still fit barely. She drove to Morgan Trust Bank on Wilshire Boulevard in West LA, walking through the marble lobby with her head high despite everything screaming at her to collapse. "I need to access box 912, she told the attendant. The woman's eyes flickered with something Ava couldn't read. "Right this way, Ms. Morgan. We've been expecting you." The vault room was cold and silent. The attendant led Ava to a private viewing room, then left her alone with box 912. Ava inserted the key with shaking hands. Inside was a world she didn't know existed, stock portfolios from companies she recognized. Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, held in her mother's name for over 20 years. Real estate deeds to properties in Malibu, Manhattan, and Seattle. Equity stakes in tech startups. A 20% silent partnership in a luxury skincare brand called Lumiere that Ava had seen in every Sephora. Legal trusts, investment accounts, monthly passive income statements showing numbers that made Ava's vision blur. $3 million per month. And at the bottom, a leather folder labeled Ava's protection plan. Inside was a document her mother had written 2 years ago, dated exactly 6 months after Ava married Ethan. "To my daughter, if you're reading this, then Ethan has shown his true nature. I knew he would. I saw it in his eyes the first time he looked at our home. The disgust he tried to hide, the calculation behind his smile. The Blakes are a family who worship money and power above all else. I built this empire to protect you from them. I started with nothing. After your father left, I worked 3 jobs and learned everything I could about investing. I was invisible to people like the Blakes, just another black woman working in accounting, easy to underestimate. That invisibility became my greatest asset. I built wealth quietly, carefully, and completely off their radar. Every investment, every property, every dollar was hidden behind trusts and shell companies they'll never trace. Now it's yours. Use it wisely. Use it strategically. And when the time comes, show them exactly who you are." Ava's tears fell onto the pages, blurring ink that had already changed her life. Her mother had been a financial genius, disguised as an ordinary woman. She'd built a $500 million empire while letting the world think she was broke, and she'd done it to shield her daughter. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Morgan?" The bank manager entered, an older black man with kind eyes. "My name is Daniel Pierce. I was your mother's attorney and financial advisor. She asked me to meet with you after you opened the box." Daniel sat across from her, his expression gentle but serious. "Your mother was one of the most brilliant strategists I've ever known," he said. "She predicted this moment 2 years ago. She saw through Ethan Blake before you ever suspected anything was wrong." "Why didn't she tell me?" Ava whispered. "Because you loved him. And she knew you had to discover his true nature on your own, or you'd never fully believe it." Daniel opened his briefcase. "She left very specific instructions for rebuilding your life." He handed her a document titled Step-by-Step Plan for Ava's Resurrection. Step 1. Disappear from Ethan's life completely. Step 2. Build influence quietly within high society. Step 3. Document everything about Ethan's deceptions. Step 4. When the moment is right, reveal the truth publicly. "Your mother fought for you even after death," Daniel said. "Now it's your turn to fight for yourself and your baby." Ava looked down at her belly, then back at the documents spread before her. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't abandoned. She was wealthy, protected, and equipped with a battle plan, designed by the woman who loved her most. "Tell me what to do," Ava said, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. Daniel smiled. "Let's begin." Ava moved into her mother's secret estate in Malibu 3 days later. She hadn't known it existed. The property sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, hidden behind gates and tall hedges that made it invisible from Pacific Coast Highway. 4 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, infinity pool, a view that stretched from Malibu Pier to Point Doom, worth $12 million, completely paid off. "Your mother bought this 15 years ago," Daniel explained as they walked through the sun-drenched living room. "She came here on weekends, called it her thinking place." Ava traced her fingers along the white marble countertops, imagining her mother here, building an empire in secret while the world dismissed her. "She wanted you to raise your baby here," Daniel continued, "away from the Blakes, away from anyone who ever underestimated you." That afternoon, Ava met Dr. Serena Caldwell, the financial advisor her mother had worked with for over a decade. Serena was sharp, elegant, a black woman in her 50s who'd built her own wealth management firm in Century City. "Your mother and I had a pact," Serena said over coffee on Ava's new terrace. "We called ourselves the Invisible Empire, women who built wealth while society overlooked us." She opened her laptop, showing Ava a dashboard that mapped out every asset, every investment, every revenue stream. "You're generating approximately $3.2 million monthly in passive income," Serena explained. "Your net worth is $540 million, growing by roughly 6% annually." The numbers felt surreal. "I don't know how to manage this," Ava admitted. "You don't have to. Not yet. I'll handle the finances while you focus on building your public presence." Serena leaned forward. "Your mother's plan requires you to become visible in the right circles. Charity boards, philanthropic events, places where influence is built and reputations are made." "Why?" "Because when you reveal the truth about Ethan, you need people to already know who you are. Not as his abandoned pregnant wife, but as Ava Morgan, philanthropist, businesswoman, force of nature." Over the next month, Ava transformed. She hired a stylist who understood how to dress her pregnant body with elegance instead of hiding it. She joined the board of a women's shelter in downtown LA that her mother had quietly supported for years. She made anonymous donations to children's hospitals and education programs. Her name began appearing in society newsletters. Small mentions at first. Ava Morgan, daughter of late financial advisor Camille Morgan, joining the board of Safe Haven Women's Shelter. She attended her first charity luncheon at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, 8.5 months pregnant, glowing with purpose instead of shame. Women approached her, influential women who ran foundations and sat on non-profit boards. "We knew your mother," one told her. "She was brilliant, quiet, but brilliant." Ava smiled, realizing that her mother had built a network she'd never even mentioned. Meanwhile, across Los Angeles, Ethan's world was beginning to crack. His tech startup, Next Gen Solutions, lost a major investor who cited concerns about leadership stability. Rumors circulated about his affair with Brielle, particularly awkward since he'd announced her pregnancy on Instagram the same week he divorced Ava. Except Brielle wasn't showing. Not at 8 weeks, not at 12, not at 16. People started asking questions. One evening, as Ava sat on her terrace watching the sunset over the Pacific, her phone buzzed. Ethan's name lit up the screen. She stared at it until it went to voicemail. He called again and again. Ava blocked his number. She wasn't ready. Not yet. But soon. Ethan's life unraveled slowly, then all at once. It started with the investors. Next Gen Solutions had been his pride, an AI-driven marketing platform that promised to revolutionize social media advertising. He'd secured $12 million in Series A funding 6 months before divorcing Ava, but now venture capitalists were pulling back. "We're concerned about stability," his lead investor said during a video call. "The optics of divorcing your pregnant wife at her mother's funeral, that's trending on Twitter, Ethan, not in a good way." "That's personal," Ethan snapped. "It has nothing to do with my company. Everything is about optics in this industry. Fix your reputation, or we're out." The call ended. Ethan slammed his laptop shut, panic rising in his chest. He'd built everything on the assumption that his wealthy family name and Stanford degree would carry him through any controversy. But the Blake name didn't shine as brightly as it used to. His father's commercial real estate empire was struggling after 2 major tenants in their downtown LA properties filed bankruptcy. His mother's social standing was slipping as old money families in Los Angeles quietly distanced themselves from the Blakes' increasingly obvious desperation. Then there was Brielle, his beautiful, sophisticated girlfriend, who was supposed to be pregnant with his baby. Except she wasn't. The miscarriage announcement came 3 months after she'd claimed pregnancy, conveniently timed after too many people had started noticing her complete lack of baby bump, despite supposedly being in her 2nd trimester. "I'm devastated," Brielle told Ethan over champagne at Catch LA, not looking particularly devastated. Ethan studied her carefully manicured face, the designer dress that cost more than most people's rent. The coldness behind her practiced sympathy. She'd never been pregnant. He knew it. And somewhere deep down, he'd known it from the beginning. She'd lied to speed up his divorce, to secure her place in his life before Ava could fight back. But Ava hadn't fought back. She'd vanished. Ethan tried calling her 47 times over 3 weeks. Every call went to voicemail. Every text went unanswered. He drove to her apartment in downtown LA and found it empty, the lease terminated. He called her cousin Jessica. "I don't know where she is," Jessica said coldly. "And if I did, I wouldn't tell you. What you did at that funeral, unforgivable." The Blakes started panicking when they heard the rumors. Ava Morgan donated $100,000 to Safe Haven Women's Shelter. Victoria Blake told Ethan over dinner at their Hancock Park mansion. Where did she get that kind of money? She doesn't have money, Ethan said. Her mother was broke. Then explain the donation. Explain the fact that she's been seen at charity events, wearing Oscar de la Renta and living in Malibu. Ethan's fork clattered onto his plate. Malibu? Your father's investigator found her. She's living in a $12 million estate overlooking the ocean. Victoria's voice was sharp with accusation. You told us Camille Morgan had nothing. She didn't. She lived in a tiny house in Glendale, drove a Honda. Richard Blake leaned forward, his expression dark. Then someone is funding your ex-wife, and you need to find out who before she decides to make trouble for this family. But Ethan was already spiraling. If Ava had money, real money, then everything he'd assumed about his position of power was wrong. He'd divorced her because she was beneath him, because she brought nothing to the marriage except her ordinary background and ordinary mother. What if he'd been wrong? What if he'd made a terrible mistake? Ava's public presence grew carefully, deliberately, exactly as her mother had planned. She appeared at a children's hospital fundraiser in Century City, 9 months pregnant and radiant, writing a check for $50,000. Photographs surfaced online. Society blogs picked up the story. Mystery philanthropist Ava Morgan continues late mother's legacy of charitable giving. She joined the board of the Los Angeles Arts Foundation, sitting beside executives from entertainment companies and tech firms. She attended gallery openings in West Hollywood, museum galas in Exposition Park, wine tastings in Santa Barbara, always elegant, always gracious, always mysterious about where her wealth came from. My mother taught me the value of strategic investment, she told a reporter from Los Angeles magazine. I'm simply continuing her work. The public sympathized, without knowing the full story. A pregnant woman whose husband divorced her at her mother's funeral, who rebuilt her life with grace and dignity. That was a narrative people loved. Meanwhile, Ava was building something else behind the scenes. Evidence. Daniel Pierce helped her compile documents proving Ethan's 18-month affair with Brielle. Hotel receipts charged to credit cards he claimed were for business trips. Flight records to San Diego, Palm Springs, and Vegas on weekends he'd told Ava he was working. Text messages recovered from cloud backups. Photographs from Brielle's private Instagram showing her with Ethan months before the divorce, and the most damning piece, a recording. Victoria Blake had left a voicemail on Ethan's phone 2 years ago, when Ava was newly pregnant. Handle this carefully. We can't let her family get any financial claim to Blake money. If necessary, we'll find a way to end this marriage before the baby complicates things further. Ava had recovered it from a backup Ethan never knew she had access to. The Blakes hadn't just tolerated his affair. They'd encouraged it, planned for it, used her mother's funeral as the perfect moment to strike. One evening, as Ava practiced prenatal yoga on her terrace overlooking the Pacific, Daniel called. The Pacific Horizon Gala announced its sponsors today, he said. You're listed as premier sponsor. The Pacific Horizon Gala was the event her mother had helped found 15 years ago. An exclusive charity event benefiting children's education programs across California, held annually at the Beverly Hills Hotel, attended by everyone who mattered in Los Angeles society, including the Blakes. Ethan and his family will be there, Daniel continued. They attend every year for networking. I know, Ava said calmly. Are you sure you're ready? Ava placed her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter kick strong and determined beneath her palm. My mother prepared me for this moment my entire life. I just didn't know it until now. Then let's make sure everything is perfect. Over the next 3 weeks, Ava prepared. She worked with a speechwriter on her remarks. She rehearsed with Dr. Caldwell. ensuring her financial documentation was airtight. She hired the best entertainment attorney in Los Angeles to verify that every piece of evidence was legally obtained and permissible to disclose. She had her hair and makeup professionally done. Her stylist chose a custom emerald gown that made her look like royalty. The invitations went out. Ethan Blake received his, along with a personal note from the gala committee congratulating him on Next Gen's continued success. A polite fiction everyone knew was crumbling. The night before the gala, Ava stood in her closet looking at the emerald dress hanging there. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the world would know the truth. Tomorrow, Ethan Blake would understand exactly what he'd lost. The invitation arrived at the Blake Mansion in Hancock Park on embossed cardstock, gold lettering announcing the Pacific Horizon Gala. Victoria Blake opened it over morning coffee, scanning the sponsor list with practiced efficiency. She dropped her cup. "Richard!" Her husband appeared in the doorway, annoyed at being interrupted during his business calls. "What?" "Ava Morgan is listed as premier sponsor. $250,000 donation." Richard snatched the invitation, his face darkening as he read. "Call Ethan, now." 10 minutes later, Ethan stood in his parents' study, staring at the invitation like it might explode. "Where is she getting this money?" Victoria demanded. $250,000 donations? Estates in Malibu? Designer clothes? "I don't know," Ethan admitted, his voice hollow. "You told us Camille Morgan had nothing. You said Ava would be desperate, that she'd come crawling back. That's what I believed. Belief doesn't matter. Facts matter." Richard's voice was ice. "Your ex-wife is making us look like fools. She's rising in society while you're losing investors and credibility. I'm handling it. Handle it faster. The gala is in 3 days. She'll be there. You'll be there. This family cannot afford another public humiliation." Ethan drove back to his downtown LA apartment, his mind racing. Brielle was waiting, scrolling through Instagram, not bothering to look up when he entered. "Your ex-wife is trending," she said casually. "People are calling her inspiring, a phoenix rising from the ashes. I'm aware. Should I be worried?" "About what?" Brielle finally looked at him, her expression calculating. "About whether you made a mistake leaving her." Don't be ridiculous. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a mistake. A catastrophic, irreversible mistake. He'd traded Ava, loyal, loving, genuine, for Brielle, who was beautiful but hollow, who'd faked a pregnancy to trap him, who spent his money but offered nothing real in return. And now Ava was everywhere he looked. Magazine features, society columns, charity boards. The woman he'd publicly humiliated was becoming someone important while he was becoming irrelevant. That night, Ethan did something he'd never done before. He searched his mother's name on Google alongside Camille Morgan's. What he found made his stomach drop. There were photographs from 20 years ago. Camille Morgan standing beside venture capitalists at a tech conference. Camille Morgan listed as an early investor in companies that had become worth billions. She hadn't been just an accountant. She'd been an investor, a strategist, a silent architect of wealth, and she'd hidden it all. From him, from his family, from everyone who'd dismissed her as ordinary. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Looking forward to seeing you at the gala. A." His hands shook as he read it. Ava knew he'd be there. She'd planned this. Whatever was coming, she was ready for it. The Blakes spent the next 72 hours in crisis mode. They hired a crisis PR consultant. They contacted friendly journalists to manage the narrative if needed. They prepared talking points about Ethan's business success and family values. But deep down, they knew they were walking into a trap. They just didn't know how devastating it would be. The Beverly Hills Hotel ballroom glittered like a dream. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over tables draped in ivory silk. Floral arrangements of white roses and orchids perfumed the air. Los Angeles's elite filled the room. Entertainment executives, tech founders, philanthropists, old money families. The Blakes arrived early, strategic positioning for maximum networking. Ethan wore Tom Ford, Brielle wore Versace. His parents worked the room with practiced smiles, but the energy felt wrong. People were polite but distant. Conversations ended quickly. The usual warmth toward the Blake family had cooled to professional courtesy. Then the room fell silent. Ava Morgan entered. She wore an emerald green gown that hugged her 9-month pregnant figure like it was designed specifically for this moment. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Diamonds sparkled at her ears and throat. Her mother's jewelry, hidden for years, now revealed. She looked like royalty. Every head turned. Ethan felt his breath catch. Brielle's grip on his arm tightened. His mother's face went pale. Ava glided through the ballroom, greeting guests with warmth and grace. People stood to embrace her. Photographers captured every angle. This wasn't the broken woman Ethan had left at a graveside. This was someone entirely new. Or perhaps someone who'd always existed beneath the surface, finally free to emerge. The gala program began. Speeches about education, opportunity, the legacy of giving back. Then the host took the microphone. Our final speaker needs no introduction. As premier sponsor and daughter of our co-founder Camille Morgan, please welcome Ava Morgan. Applause erupted as Ava walked to the stage. Ethan's hands were numb. Ava stood at the podium, the spotlight illuminating her face, and smiled. Good evening. Thank you for honoring my mother's legacy tonight. Her voice was steady, clear, powerful. My mother taught me that wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give. She built an empire in silence because she knew that real power doesn't need to announce itself. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd. 3 months ago, I stood at my mother's grave, 8 months pregnant, while my husband handed me divorce papers. The room went completely silent. He did it in front of everyone, while the pastor was still praying, while my mother's casket was being lowered into the ground. Ethan felt everyone's eyes turn toward him. He told me I had nothing, that his lawyers would take everything if I didn't sign immediately. So I signed. Ava paused, letting the moment breathe. What he didn't know, what his family didn't know, was that my mother had spent 20 years building a $500 million empire specifically to protect me from people like them. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. She predicted his betrayal 2 years before it happened. She left me detailed documentation of his 18-month affair. She left me properties, investments, and a legacy of strategic brilliance. Ava gestured to the screen behind her, where images appeared. Hotel receipts, flight records, text messages between Ethan and Brielle discussing handling his marriage. The voicemail from Victoria Blake suggesting they end the marriage before the baby complicated things. Brielle's Instagram posts from months before the divorce, showing her with Ethan while Ava was pregnant and caring for her dying mother. The evidence was irrefutable, devastating, comprehensive. My mother taught me that revenge is unnecessary when truth is undeniable, Ava said quietly. So I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to honor her memory by living the life she built for me, by giving back, by building up other women, by showing my daughter that dignity and truth always triumph over cruelty and lies. The ballroom erupted, not in applause but in chaos. Photographers swarmed. Journalists scrambled for statements. Security moved toward the Blakes as whispers turned to accusations. Ethan sat frozen, his face ashen, watching his entire world collapse in real time. Brielle fled, heels clicking frantically across marble floors, abandoning him without a backward glance. Victoria and Richard Blake tried to maintain composure, but their expressions betrayed them. Shock, rage, humiliation. They'd been exposed not just as cruel, but as foolish. They'd underestimated Camille Morgan and, by extension, her daughter. That underestimation had destroyed them. Social media exploded within minutes. The hashtag #AvaRises trended nationally. News outlets picked up the story. Think pieces about women reclaiming power flooded blogs and magazines. Ethan became a symbol of everything toxic in wealthy male privilege. The husband who abandoned his pregnant wife at her mother's funeral, only to discover she was wealthier and more powerful than he'd ever be. Next Gen Solutions lost its remaining investors within 48 hours. Business partners severed contracts. The company dissolved 3 weeks later. The Blakes' commercial real estate empire struggled as tenants refused to renew leases, unwilling to be associated with the family's tarnished reputation. But Ava went home to her Malibu estate and prepared for the most important moment of her life. 5 days after the gala, at 3:17 a.m., her water broke. She drove herself to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, calm and ready. 12 hours later, she held her daughter, Camille Rose Morgan, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy, beautiful, perfect. Ava stared into her daughter's eyes, seeing her mother's strength reflected there, seeing her own future unfolding in ways she'd never imagined. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. Better than okay. Daniel Pierce visited the hospital, bringing flowers and documents. "The Morgan Legacy Foundation is officially established," he said, "focused on supporting single mothers, funding women's education, and providing financial literacy programs." "My mother would love that," Ava said, tears streaming down her face. "She would, and she'd be so proud of you." Serena Caldwell came next, bringing baby gifts and financial updates. "Your net worth increased by $12 million this quarter," she said. The viral media attention brought opportunities, speaking engagements, book deals, partnerships. "If you want them." Ava looked down at Camille, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I want whatever lets me raise my daughter with the truth my mother taught me. That dignity matters more than revenge. That strategic patience beats impulsive cruelty, that women who are underestimated become the most dangerous players of all." 6 months later, Ava stood on the terrace of her Malibu estate, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and crimson. Camille was in her arms, babbling happily, reaching for the light. The Morgan Legacy Foundation had awarded its first grants. 50 single mothers received financial support, job training, and childcare assistance. Ava had turned her pain into purpose. She thought about Ethan sometimes, but only briefly. He'd moved to New York, trying to rebuild far from Los Angeles and the reputation he'd destroyed. The Blakes had faded into obscurity, their influence evaporated. Brielle had latched onto another wealthy man, repeating patterns that would inevitably collapse, but Ava had risen, not because she sought revenge, but because she embraced the truth of who she'd always been, strong, brilliant, worthy. "Look at the sunset, baby girl," Ava whispered to her daughter. "Your grandmother built all of this for us. And now? Now we build even more." Camille giggled, reaching for the light, and Ava smiled, knowing her mother was watching, knowing that dignity and truth had triumphed exactly as planned.